Hello everybody, welcome to Haiku Talk. I'm your host Ben Ga, your friendly neighborhood haiku poet, and today we're going to be taking a look at a one-liner from one of my very favorite poets of all time, Carolyn Hall. The first two words of that one-liner are fingers crossed, and it comes to us from the latest and last issue of Bones' journal. So, with that said, you know what time it is. Time to sit back, relax, grab yourself a tasty beverage, and let's haiku. Welcome back. It's good to be with you again here at Haiku Talk for another episode. And I want to thank everyone that has subscribed to the channel. We've crested a 300 subscriber milestone, which isn't super huge. Nobody wins awards for that, but for a small little channel like this with a very specific interest group, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much. Now, this poem is by one of my favorite poets of all time, who I believe I have every one of her books that's yet available out there. And she's just one of those benchmark poets, you know, that you hope to get to be as good as them one day or get close. And this poem, it's a great one-liner. I think it illustrates why one-liners work, and comes to us, unfortunately, from the last issue of Bones' journal. Well, let's take a look at the poem. The poem goes like this. Fingers crossed, it's not human. Backyard bone. Fingers crossed, it's not human. Backyard bone. Good one for October, with Halloween getting closer. And one that if anyone's done some digging around in their backyard, or anybody's backyard, or in the woods or anywhere, and you come across a bone, probably had this thought. It's a very real kind of experience. And it's a nicely constructed one-line haiku. So how does it work? How does it work? Normally when we look at the three-liners, we see the fragment and the phrase. And here, I think you could make that same case, with the phrase being, fingers crossed, it's not human, and the fragment being, backyard bone. The works just the same way. It's just lined on one bone-like line. And it, does provide you that, takes you into the poem and then gives you that sort of punch at the end. So let's kind of break this down a little bit. How does this work? How do we read this poem? The very first thing that I do or the thing that grabs my attention when I read this is I go fingers crossed, and that I stop at in very briefly in my head, because fingers, it doesn't lend itself for me to pause, but fingers crossed, there's a hard D, the crossed, I'm saying it as a T, but it's a D. The hard end there and crossed makes me pause, and now I have two words that kind of form a phrase of a thing. So fingers crossed, not just fingers, but fingers crossed. That's an image. That's a thing. And I almost want to pause and put a space there. In fact, when I did another recording of this, an outtake, I read it as fingers crossed, it's not human, backyard bone. I put in a bigger pause there, and I didn't really quite like that, so we started again. So fingers crossed, that's where I start, and that has a lot of implications to it, fingers crossed. At this point, we don't know what's coming next, so it could be fingers crossed for good luck, could be fingers crossed you're lying, could be fingers crossed for who knows what. But already, the imagination and my brain and my catalog in my head is starting to filter and catalog and starting to narrow down to something specific. So fingers crossed, followed by it's not human. It's not human. Ooh. which is interesting because you have fingers crossed it's not human. What am I looking at here? I don't know. But it's the stakes just got really high, and now the fact that you've got your fingers crossed and you're hoping whatever you're looking at is not human. Stakes are high. It's a very intriguing moment. And then we get the final punch, the final two words, which is the fragment here of backyard bone. Backyard bone. And that really snaps everything into place. And now we know what we're looking at. On this one line, this kind of bone line looking poem, we are hoping this bone that we found is not human. Now, what's interesting about this piece is that I've read it dozens of times already, over and over again, and every time I want to read it, there's a part of me that wants to say backyard bones as if the fingers, the bones that you're seeing in front of you are actually finger bones that are crossed. Like, because I just keep rephrasing this over and over and over, and that's a mental thing that happens in my head, which adds a cool, eerie element to the poem. And it might just be the way I'm reading it. I don't know if you come across it the same way, but I just keep looping through this thing. And fingers crossed, it's not human backyard bone. I'm glad it ends in a singular bone because it's a hard end, and it's gives you a singular thing to work on. But I just think of fingers and how bony that they are. And I think of skeletons, and I think of, a bony skeleton and fingers, and looking at a bone and thinking of human bones and perhaps non-human bones. And I just get all swept up in these skeletal images. And it's a spooky, creepy, yet entertaining place to be with all of these different images floating around in my head. Because they're all generated from the moment in the poem, and they're all relevant to all the words in the poem, and they all revolve around the same concept, the same type of thing in the poem. And that's a good thing. That's something you want to have happen in your haiku. Now, if you're starting to have a bunch of different images and they're popping all over in different directions, that can be a problem, because then the poem is not necessarily centered on a figure, centered on something grounded that holds you into one experience. This one, is just a classically great Carolyn Hall poem. It's properly weighted. It's got a nice rhythm to it. It's good use of consonants and vowels, and it's visual. It's tangible. It's something that that's not hard to wrap your head around. All qualities that I look for in a good haiku, and all qualities that you find consistently through Carolyn Hall's work. So well done, well done, well done. And with that said, that's it for today's episode. Thank you all for tuning in. It's been a pleasure to spend some time with you again. If you like this episode, hit a thumbs up. If you feel like leaving a comment on the episode of how you might have read this, or if you've dug up some bones in your backyard and figured it out. Now, I've actually, on 2 different occasions, have dug up bones, one in the woods as a kid playing around with some friends, and one on the beach in Florida, dug up a bone and then dug up bones. And the bones in the woods turned out to look like a dog skeleton, which we kind of put together a little bit. And then the one on the beach turned out to be a sea turtle, which was fun to kind of piece together a little bit and kind of do a lot of digging. Both of those not human bones, but of course the very first strike of the bone, we were all wondering what this was. Though I have to probably project backwards and think maybe my little younger self might have been hoping it was a dinosaur bone. But in these instances, when you are a homeowner and you are digging around in your backyard, you could run into all sorts of things, pets commonly, but there are those stories of people finding bodies buried in the backyard. And, fingers crossed, nobody runs into that themselves. So again, thank you for tuning in. Again, like this if you've liked the episode. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, and thank you those who have subscribed, think about subscribing. And if you've liked and subscribed, think about ringing the bell to get notified when new episodes appear. Until then, thank you all. Fingers crossed for a good day for you all tomorrow. Thanks. Bye-bye.